Welcome to Chapter 6. Human political behavior is inherently geographical. Political geography explores how power, identity, and borders take shape and shift over time. From the breakup of empires, the drawing and redrawing of national boundaries, to the fervor of nationalism and movements for secession, nearly every significant political event finds spatial expression. Geography is not simply a backdrop. It's a driving force in struggles for control and meaning, reflected in the constantly changing political map. Region. Nearly every part of the earth is now bounded by lines that signify political claims. These borders are not merely lines on a map. They profoundly affect how spaces are governed, defended, and administered. But these lines are dynamic. They're debated, moved, erased, or redrawn through warfare, diplomacy, and negotiation. How states are shaped and where their borders lie have profound implications on the people who live within and across them. Region, nations, and states. Modern states are a recent creation in the long timeline of history. Each state is marked by clear territorial boundaries and governed by a centralized authority that claims exclusive sovereignty. But a nation is different. It's a group of people bound together by a sense of belonging to a homeland, shaped by common culture, language, or religion. Political geography examines how nation and state identities sometimes unite and often clash. The ideal is the nation-state, but this is rarely achieved in practice. Figure 6.1 The Independent Countries of the World. The 20th century saw an explosion in the number of independent countries, especially after world wars and the end of colonial empires in Africa and Asia. Today's map shows nearly 200 states. This rapid change reminds us that sovereignty and territory are historical products, always in motion, rarely settle for long. Region, nation-state. The nation-state ideal is that people who share culture and a homeland should have a right, called self-determination, to govern themselves. Nationalism is the deep attachment to one's nation and homeland, fueling calls for sovereignty. States also mark a claim to territory through legal boundaries and by investing landscapes with symbols of power, such as flags, national museums, and parks. Region, reality of nation-states. Despite the nation-state ideal, most states are home to many different groups, and many nations are spread across states. European colonialism is a key reason, since boundaries were drawn with little attention to local cultures. The result is a patchwork of cultures within most states, and many nations lacking a state of their own. Figure 6.2 Languages of the Republic of South Africa. South Africa illustrates this well. Its population is made up of people who speak 10 indigenous languages, as well as those introduced by colonial settlers. This linguistic diversity is a legacy of both deep history and recent colonial rule. Region, the shape of states. Countries aren't all shaped alike. Compact countries like France are more easily governed. Others, like Chile or Indonesia, are elongated or fragmented, posing challenges for communication and unity. Enclaves and exclaves, territories separated from their country or entirely surrounded by another, complicate administration and can lead to instability or even secessionist movements. Region, centripetal forces. Centripetal forces are those that unite and reinforce the coherence of a state, a shared language, national celebrations and monuments, and collective memories. States often actively promote these to build national identity and unity. National symbols are woven throughout the landscape, flags, museums, parks, serving to bring people together. Region, centrifugal forces. By contrast, centrifugal forces destabilize and fragment states. These include sharp economic, religious, or linguistic divides, especially where a single group dominates the state center and marginalizes minorities to peripheral regions. Ethnic and regional inequalities risk tearing countries apart. Figure 6.4 ethnic divisions in Myanmar. Myanmar remains deeply divided. Ethnic Burmans control the country's heartland, military, and capital, while minorities live at the country's borders and hills. These marginalized groups face discrimination, fueling ongoing conflict and attempts at greater autonomy or even secession. Region, separatism. When centrifugal forces are strong, separatist movements often emerge. Ethnic groups may push for their own autonomous regions or for full independence, as seen recently in East Timor, South Sudan, Kurdistan, and Catalonia. These struggles often reshape boundaries, at times through tense standoffs, referenda, and sometimes war. Figure 6.5 protests for an independent Catalonia. Catalonia exemplifies modern separatist energy within a European democracy. Large-scale protests and referenda reflect the region's distinct identity and long-standing struggles with Spain's central authorities. Region, a move to return home. Many ethnic groups today are split by modern borders. Irredentism occurs when countries seek to reclaim and reunite ethnic kin across borders, as in Russia's annexation of Crimea. Such political moves, often justified through appeals to history and ethnicity, can ignite international conflict. Region, nations without states. A stateless nation is an ethnic group that is large and cohesive but lacks a state of its own, being split across multiple countries. The Kurds, spread across Turkey, Syria, Iraq, and Iran, are the best-known example. Despite deep-rooted presence and strong cultural identity, such groups often struggle to achieve sovereignty. Figure 6.6 Kurdistan. The Kurdish homeland stretches across 4 countries. Numbering over 30 million, the Kurds exemplify a nation seeking statehood, facing both hope and struggle in their quest for self-determination, but as yet unsuccessful. Region, types of government. The organization of government affects how power and resources are distributed. Federal states, like the U.S. or Nigeria, give significant autonomy to local governments, helping accommodate diversity and reduce fragmentation. Unitary states, like China or Great Britain, concentrate power at the center, promoting uniformity across their territories. Some indigenous territories, such as U.S. Native American reservations, have a unique legal status derived from treaties and limited sovereignty. Region, elections and voting. Political geography isn't just about borders. It shapes democracy. Every 10 years, the U.S. redraws congressional districts based on population shifts in a process known as redistricting. Manipulating these borders, gerrymandering, can set the balance of power for a decade or more, often producing oddly shaped districts designed to favor one party or group. Figure 6.8 Gerrymandering of a congressional district in Maryland. Maryland's 3rd congressional district shows how extreme gerrymandering can become, slicing through communities in service of political advantage. Such tactics, with the help of new technologies, have made gaming the system easier and more controversial. Figure 6.9 How to gerrymander the vote. Packing and cracking, concentrating or dividing opposition voters, are 2 gerrymandering strategies clearly illustrated in these diagrams. This practice raises urgent concerns for representation and the health of democracy. Red states versus blue states. In American politics, red and blue have come to stand for Republican and Democratic strongholds. But maps using solid colors can mislead, exaggerating divisions and obscuring the true complexity of voter preferences. The color-coded political landscape says as much about the mapping choices as about the country's true divisions. Figure 6.10 2016 U.S. presidential election results. Standard state color maps seem to show a starkly divided U.S., but this oversimplifies voting patterns. Urban centers in large states may be overwhelmingly influential in actual electoral dynamics. Figure 6.11 cartogram of the 2012 presidential election results. A cartogram, which sizes states by population rather than area, better reflects each state's voting impact and reveals a more balanced split between parties. Figures 6.12 and 6.13a Purple America. Other election maps. Using gradations of color for counties or three-dimensional maps that show the number of voters reveals that America is far more purple mixed than red or blue. The real divisions are often between rural and urban areas, not just states. Mobility, one of two. Political authority, new laws, and even revolutionary ideas can cross borders, often travel along the same routes as people, resources, and information. As a result, the political map is never static, and networks of cities, migration, and even digital connections continually reshape it. Figure 6.14, the diffusion of Russian political control. From a single fortified settlement, Moscow extended its influence outward over centuries. By the 19th century, Russian rule stretched across Eurasia, illustrating how political power diffuses spatially over time. The spread of political innovation. Moves for independence and democracy have often been sparked by ideas brought home from abroad. African and Asian independence in the 20th century gained momentum as Western political ideals of self-determination were adopted and localized by colonial subjects. Figure 6.16 African independence from European colonial rule. The independence movements that swept Africa demonstrate how ideas and politics cross borders and ignite rapid regional change, turning a continent from a patchwork of colonies to a concert of new nations in a few decades. Mobility, violence and mobility. Political instability often brings forced migration. Refugees flee violence, persecution, or attempts at ethnic cleansing, as seen in Rwanda, Sudan, and Myanmar. Others escape civil wars, like the ongoing crisis in Syria, risking everything in search of safety. These mass movements create new political and humanitarian challenges across borders. Figure 6.17 Ethnic cleansing in Western Myanmar. The Rohingya, a Muslim minority, have been driven from their homes into Bangladesh in a campaign of violence and exclusion, one of the world's most pressing examples of displacement by state-backed ethnic conflict. Mobility, responses to these mobilities. The scale of modern displacement is staggering. Most refugees reside in less developed countries that struggle to provide even basic needs. The United Nations attempt to fill the gap, but many refugees languish for years or even decades without citizenship, rights, or prospects, a situation known as protracted statelessness. Figure 6.18 refugee spaces in the Middle East. The region remains home to millions in refugee camps, sometimes for generations. The uncertain legal status and lack of opportunity faced by these people reveals the long-term consequences of forced migration, in some cases, fundamentally altering the fabric of societies. Mobility, cyberspace. In the Internet age, ideas, information, and activism flow more freely across political boundaries, but these flows are often contested or censored by states. What is free expression in one country may be forbidden in another. Thus, digital space is also fraught with legal and political boundaries that shape public dialogue and protest. Figure 6.20 Cyber censorship during the Arab Spring. During the Arab Spring of 2011, governments across the Middle East restricted internet access to stifle protest and information sharing, demonstrating the power of states to shape digital as well as physical political landscapes. Globalization, one of two. Globalization's effects are contradictory. It can both empower and weaken states. Supranational organizations, like NAFTA, the EU, or the WTO, link countries together in unprecedented ways, sometimes enhancing influence, but also sometimes undercutting sovereignty. Figure 6.21, a case of effective sovereignty. U.S. control over Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, demonstrates how sovereignty is not just about legal borders, but about the effective exercise of power, reminding us that territory and authority do not always precisely overlap. Globalization, supranationalism. Countries may join supranational organizations for common goals, combining economic, political, or military policy. Examples range from NATO and the WTO to ASEAN and the African Union. These institutions facilitate cooperation, but also require states to share elements of their sovereignty. Figure 6.22, some supranational political organizations in the Eastern Hemisphere. A variety of international bodies operate within the region. Their powers and cohesion vary, but all reflect the ongoing balancing act between cooperation and independence in a global era. Globalization, transnationalism. Today, migration, communication, and connections mean people live, work, and sustain bonds across borders, a phenomenon called transnationalism. Ties to homeland are maintained and transformed in new contexts, as seen in communities from Hong Kong immigrants in Vancouver to global diasporas reshaping neighborhoods and economies. Nature, culture. Political decisions affect how people use land and resources, including policies on environmental conservation or exploitation. The nature-culture relationship is central to understanding impacts ranging from global warming to the environmental footprint of militaries. Nation-states' policies leave lasting marks on ecosystems and boundaries. Nature, culture, political ecology. Political ecology examines how states' economic and political policies shape resource use, environmental outcomes, and the livelihoods of people, connecting local actions and global consequences. Economic hardship or colonial histories may push people to exploit marginal lands, raising issues of environmental justice and equity. Nature, culture, geopolitics. Geopolitics explores the ways geography and power are intertwined. Mountains, rivers, deserts, and coasts can help protect states or become the object of competition. Throughout history, access to resources and physical barriers have shaped the fortunes of kingdoms and modern countries alike. Figure 6.23, the distribution of landforms in France. France's natural landscape, with mountains, rivers, and ridges, illustrates how physical features protect and shape a state's core area. These barriers have for centuries affected defense and political development. Nature, culture, buffers and satellites. Powerful states often shield their interests using other, weaker states. A buffer state exists between two rivals, like Thailand between colonial empires, while a satellite state is controlled by another power, as in part of Eastern Europe during the Cold War or Iraq today. Figure 6.25, Siam, now Thailand, buffer between empires. Historically, Thailand's independence protected both British and French colonial interests and prevented direct conflict, demonstrating how the map can be shaped by the need for strategic buffers. Nature, culture, geopolitics today. Modern geopolitics studies the complex relationships among environmental, cultural, and economic geographies and their impacts on political decisions. The context for these decisions includes histories of conflict, alliances, and contemporary environmental challenges. Nature, culture, impacts of rising seas. Rising sea levels will reshape territorial sovereignty and access to resources, particularly for small island nations and coastal states. Melting polar ice is opening new shipping lanes in the Arctic, spurring a race among nearby countries to establish claims over newly accessible land and resources. Figure 6.26 new race for territory in the Arctic. As Arctic ice recedes, countries like the U.S., Russia, Canada, Denmark, and Norway jockey for new territory and resources, foreshadowing future geopolitical tensions over climate-driven changes. Nature, culture, impacts of protection. Military conflict and preparation can devastate environments. Defoliants in war, burning oil fields, the footprint of refugee camps, and radioactive waste from weapons degrade ecosystems and threaten public health. Figure 6.27 nuclear waste storage at the Hanford Nuclear Reservation. Sites like Hanford and Washington are a reminder that military and strategic decisions can create enduring environmental risks, requiring long-term responsibility and management. Cultural landscape. State actions and laws leave marks on the landscape, from the clear-cut squares of the township and range system to the silhouette of monuments, national parks, and borderlines. These features are visual records of political power, vision, and sometimes struggle. Cultural landscape. Legal codes in the landscape. Policies can shape the built environment dramatically. Thomas Jefferson's township and range grid left a checkerboard imprint on much of the American Midwest, while city regulations, like those restricting building heights, can shape skylines. Figure 6.29 imposing order on the landscape. Aerial photos of farmland in Idaho show the regular, geometric pattern of land division by law, visual evidence of governance transforming raw land into social space. Figure 6.30 legal height restrictions can greatly influence urban landscapes. Singapore's lack of height restrictions allowed skyscrapers to define its skyline, while in Rio de Janeiro, height limits preserve natural landforms as the tallest features. Cultural landscape. Borders. Borders can symbolize both division and cooperation. Some, like the International Peace Garden, mark peaceful coexistence. Others remain sites of conflict or invisibility, sometimes highly militarized, sometimes almost invisible. Figure 6.31, the International Peace Garden. The border between the United States and Canada is celebrated with a formally landscaped park, emphasizing peace through the symbolic act of marking an otherwise undetectable international boundary. Cultural landscape. Iconography. Landscapes are filled with the stories that states choose to tell. Monuments, memorials, and architecture express national ideals, justify political power, and spark debate. What is celebrated and what is contested can change with time and with shifts in collective identity. Figure 6.34 Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore is a monument to American nationalism. Its carved faces are instantly recognizable symbols of the nation's history. Yet for some, these monuments are contentious, raising questions about whose stories are told, whose are erased, and how landscapes can be sites of struggle and renewal. Figure 6.35 Opera Square in Yerevan, Armenia's capital. Opera Square, an iconic urban space, is a symbol and touchstone of Armenian national identity. Its design and use have been at the heart of debates over how a nation understands itself and expresses its collective aspirations, especially in periods of transition. Conclusion. Political geography links the local to the global, from the layout of towns and electoral districts to the rise and fall of empires and the forging of new nations. Nationalism remains a powerful force, but globalization, technology, environmental change, and shifting identities are continually redrawing the lines on the world's map. Landscapes, both natural and cultural, record and shape these ongoing stories.